of our goals is to make sure all our customers are getting the full life of their components.
On every rebuild, we tear down the component, we clean up the parts, and then we spend time inspecting everything that's within any of the components and make reuse decisions based on that.
So right behind us we have a 3516 789 engine. It's just coming in for a disassembly and tear down. What he's doing now is taking pictures of it to get an idea of what the outside of the engine looks like, and as throughout the teardown he'll take more pictures. We have multiple document forms that he will actually check off. They're like check boxes. He'll go through that each time on each phase throughout this rebuild. We take all the parts, put them in baskets, put them in the washer, runs multiple cycles and gets all the dirt, grease, grime off of them before we can hand inspect them down there at the very end of the line. We follow all CAT reusability guidelines all the way to the T. Every one of our technicians are trained on that measurement.
Looking at failures and components that haven't completely failed. Maybe they're just at the end of life. Are they making wise reuse decisions and when to rebuild? We want to make sure that the customer is getting the most benefit out of their purchase of the CAT equipment.
Right behind me over here, he's actually polishing a 3508 crankshaft. He'll go through and look at all the bolt holes, make sure there's nothing in them, that the washer didn't get out. He checks all the oil galleys. He's checking the throws where the counterweights actually sit, and he's currently polishing everything to get any imperfections out of that, make sure there's no watermarks or anything that will not come out. They do go through each journal and they're looking for any imperfections whatsoever or any pitting that we have. We are looking for that to make sure that camshaft could run another life. We want to make sure our customers are getting the best benefit for this. So each one of these phases will have a quality control card that they will fill out to make sure that we are constantly documenting that process. So that's our small engine disassembly. All the smaller engines, anything from a 3306 and down, go there. And so very similar to the large side is they tear everything down, inspect it, wash it back here before it goes on to the next phase. My part standpoint is they can get it back to Caterpillar and understand, hey, are they having any worldwide issues or is this just a unique type failure? And then we can understand that and use that in our rebuild process going forward when we make decisions. So if an engine comes in and it's got a fuel system on it like this, we'll take it off and it comes over to this area. This is a dedicated technician that deals with the only type of fuel system. So he will actually tear it down, rebuild it, test it, and then it's ready to go on the engine. So we have dedicated assembly technicians that will take it from here and put it on there. On an engine, there's a lot of components that come off of it. Turbos are just one piece of it. We actually rebuild all that. We have expertise in that space. We don't just replace parts. So in this room here, we also build turbos. We'll tear them down in another area and clean them up, bring them in here, and able to assemble them into a nice clean environment. So the turbo itself, obviously when it was disassembled and inspected, it was noticed that there was some wear where it actually clamps onto the engine. So if that thing wears too much, you're gonna allow boost to escape, which then you're gonna lose power. You actually can see it, you can feel it. It's very, very easy to recognize, but you can obviously just replace the part, but we value of actually salvaging that part. So what we do is we use a technology called flame spray. So basically it's using a powder, and then once you put it through a system, it's an oxygen acetylene, and it solidifies into basically a liquid metal, and it bonds to that component. And then you build it back up. It's actually stronger than it was before, and then you just go back and you just machine it back down and get it to the right spec that you need to. We can actually do it on a lot of different parts, not just blocks, but it saves a whole lot of cost for that customer by being able to salvage and repair that piece of iron compared to just replacing it. You don't treat it any differently, and once it's done, you just assemble it like it was before. So what that machine does is it's putting a complete smooth surface on that cylinder head. The biggest thing you want is for it can be sealing. You want it to seal against the block perfectly. So we bring them over here, we check everything out, and then we bring it over to that machine. When they go in there, they measure it in multiple different places throughout the head. There is a spec on how much that can actually move from one side to the other. Each head's a little different, but he will actually cut that and get it perfectly level to make sure it's flat. It's very important that we run the engines as it would be if it was in the machine. We want to run it through its paces. The first thing we do is we hook it up. When we get it up to operating temperature, we don't really put a load on it. We just run it for about 15 to 20 minutes. Then we'll actually shut the engine down and we pull a first filter. Every filter is going to have a little bit of break-in metal, so we want to kind of look at that. We'll cut it, we'll look at each individual pleats in the filter, see what that looks like. Screw a new filter on it, top it off with oil, we run it again. This time we start gradually bringing the power into it. We're looking at, do we see anything going on with the engine? How's the engine operating? And we're looking at all the different specs that we can at the same time. We'll run it for a good hour and a half or so. Then we'll actually shut the engine down, pull another filter, look to see with that what kind of metal we have at that point, if there's any in there. If there's nothing, we'll screw a new filter on it, run it again all the way to the full life. Every engine that we do, we actually record all the metrics. We record all that and we can provide that for any customer. That includes on any of their engines that we do or any exchange components that we've actually done. If a customer would like to see that, we can provide that too. Every engine that we bring through here, regardless if it's a small repair all the way up to a full recondition, we will run it on the dyno just to make sure it's performing like the customer expects. After they've passed here, we actually pull them out. We actually have another quality control inspection. We look over the engine again. We make sure we don't see any leaks. We tape everything off that doesn't need to be painted, and then it goes into a paint booth and we put a new coat of painting on it. And at that time, it's continuing to get inspected there, and we have another quality control card that we'll check off. So in this shop here, we actually are doing pretty much all the powertrain and pumps and motors. Tear them down, inspect them, and then rebuild them back. Each one of these go through a rigorous inspection process, tear everything down. We hand inspect all the parts after they've been cleaned through the washer and make sure it's going to meet those reuse guidelines and make sure it's going to live another life. There's a lot that goes on in a pump, and if the system is not very clean, it can really cause a lot of problems. I mean, just a teaspoon of dirt inside a hydraulic system can fail the whole system. So when we go through it, we're actually looking at all the little bores and everything to make sure everything is meeting that spec that you need to. And we're talking extremely tight tolerances here when they get down to it. So we want to get that information to understand what their problem was, and so we can correlate that and actually find the issue on their pump and be able to diagnose it from there to say, yes, we can see that, we understand why you're having that problem, so we can make sure it's fixed.
As you're saying, this is out of a transmission. We've had a fatigue failure of the friction disc here, and when it broke apart, it's generated a lot of metal, a lot of disc material got into other parts of the transmission. You can see the heat that's generated on all these parts from where the discs started slipping and from the interference. The metal that was generated, the debris that was generated damaged a lot of other parts as well. Over here you can see the ring gear and some of the gears that are damaged here.
When we look at a failure just doesn't start with the iron. This is the end product. We start from the very beginning, from the time the component was actually put into the machine, how long it ran, what the maintenance practices were, what the oil samples will look like throughout its life.
We study the electronic information that we get from the ECM, we study the oil sample histories, and we look at all that and we try and determine when the failure actually started, if there are any operational practices that played a part in the failure, or if there were other things that we could improve either with the customer on our end or things that CAT is improving.
It definitely helps when we get it back on the test bench too. We can simulate that on the test bench to make sure we've corrected that problem. With the technology today, we want to know the inside and out. We want to be the experts inside and out and help a customer use this information along with everything else that's going on out there when it comes to oil samples or any of that. We can marry the two together to get them the life that they expect out of it.